Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm Mary Beth Gallagher, the Director of Engagement at Domini. Welcome to our webinar, Designing the Next 50 Years of Transportation. We really appreciate you joining, and a special thank you to all of our panelists, Porie Saikia, Alex Pazuchanics, Thomas Maltese. We're going to have a great conversation today. I'll just note on this screen that this is a webinar intended for educational and informational purposes only, not intended for investment advice.
Organizations, particularly government organizations, are complex. Decision makers and data scientists are not often the same person, rarely the same person, and there's often some layers between them. And so part of what we try to do is simplify that data into something that's manageable for a program manager, say, right, or a policymaker or an elected official. Where the element that is important is to be quick, efficient, and raise that hotspot, raise that primary point.
There is something that has become more and more evident over the last few decades, and that is the role that cities can play in delivering climate action. Whereas national governments might be slower, cities can deliver action at a much faster pace, leveraging the role of their mayors, of their staff in city halls, and ultimately their citizens. And cities are already working to do so. And C40 has been around for over 15 years now. And in the last few years, our focus has been to support the cities in developing their climate action plans that can support the city in delivering resilient and inclusive climate action that is aligned with the 1.5-degree target of the Paris Agreement. If you can think of bus ownership in an innovative way, by really shuffling how things are done and questioning the status quo, you can achieve immense success that can eventually lead to public policy change. And just to give you an example, Bogotá recently passed a Climate Emergency Act that essentially forbids any new fossil fuel buses to enter the city's fleet. And this was based on the fact that the city had already demonstrated that it was able to procure 1,500 electric buses, now currently the largest fleet of e-buses outside of China.
Even in New York today, during COVID or after COVID, you talk to people, they would rather actually drive their car. And COVID was great because there wasn't that much traffic. So people don't drive because of the congestion. But we want to get to a place where you say, I am so much more comfortable taking public transit rather than drive, because it's so tedious to be driving, to be focusing on something that I'd rather be reading a book or rather be doing something else. I would really like to get to that point. I mean, I do that myself. I come to work 5 days of work every day. Every morning I take 3 modes of transportation coming to work, and I take 3 modes of transportation going back. And I don't have a problem with that, because it's kind of, to me, it's an advantage. In New York City, under Mayor Bloomberg, who was a very active participant at C40, has gone through a tremendous change about, walking, biking, and taking over parts of city streets and turning them into just pedestrian areas. And New York City statistically actually is people who, because most people take some public transit in New York City, otherwise you wouldn't get to another, from one end, wherever you're going, it takes a lot longer public transit. So most people do that. And as a result, New York City residents are consider they walk 2 times more than the federal requirement. So they walk, and don't, I have a number which sounds really weird, but 351 minutes per week, which is twice as much of an average American.
I think the important thing to remember, the next 50 years, the next 100 years, if we do it well, it will actually in many ways look like 50 or 100 years ago, in terms of the way that people travel. In most cities, including American cities for that matter, have that core skeleton still, of walkable neighborhoods that we retrofitted for car dominance, and there's no reason that we kind of can't return to that sort of more walkable, more livable, more bikeable way. I think data is an important part of that story, but it doesn't necessarily, data and technology aren't necessarily the same thing. And I think the flying cars, the Jetsons version of the future is maybe not where we need to be, and instead think about a future that draws on the stronger elements of the transportation system of the past.